Hi, and a warm welcome. Thank you for joining me today. My name's Laura and I'm a midwife qualified for 14 years. I'm your honest midwife, and this video today is designed to give you some top tips on making decisions in pregnancy. And we know, let's be honest, this is not easy. We have lots of reasons that impact our decision making, and these decisions are really important. So please join me and follow these top 9 tips to help you make decisions that are right for you and individual to you. So tip number 1 is to understand your rights. And it's really important when making decisions and forming decisions to understand the human rights that are related to you in the country that you live in. So I recommend looking on a website called Birthrights, which is a UK-based charity. And their mission is to ensure that respectful care is provided to those accessing maternity services that respects the human rights of the individual. And they've got fantastic resources on their page. So you can just look at them on a search engine. They're called birthrights.org. And then at the top, there are certain fact sheets. So it may be that you want to find out a little bit more about your rights relating to where you give birth. There's lots of different fact sheets on there. So really helpful information. And also using that information or knowing that information, you can also ask your healthcare provider, your midwife or the doctors that are caring for you, what your rights are. Because sometimes when we get a bit lost in conversation, it redirects the focus onto you and reminds your healthcare provider that you are your own individual. So don't be afraid to bring it up. It's something that is very sacred to you as someone who's accessing maternity care. But certainly check out that website and find out a little bit more. So tip number 2 is to find evidence to help you make decisions. Now, we know maternity care should be informed by the most up-to-date evidence, and that's usually in the form of big research projects. But also, do you know that your hospitals have individual guidelines, and they can vary a little bit depending on which hospital that you're booked into? You can also find most of these online by just searching for the name of your hospital plus the guideline you are looking for. So it will be really helpful to understand what's the normal process or what's recommended in your trust. But guidelines are guidelines, and they're based on recommendations. That doesn't mean that actually you have to adhere to what's recommended, but it might help you as an individual to find a little bit more evidence and do a little bit more digging. So I'd recommend that you go to national guidelines. So generally, national guidelines, which are on a larger scale than your local guidelines, can be accessible by anyone. So if you start off by looking up the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, you can then look at the guidelines that are relevant to maternity services. And within those guidelines, it's quite helpful to understand how they've come together by looking at the pieces of research that lead into that. And for those of you that enjoy that part of researching and looking into it, you might find you have lots of bedtime reading there. The other sort of main source of national guidelines is to look up the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists website, so also shortened to RCOG, so NICE and RCOG, and they can give you a little bit more of an idea of what's recommended nationally. And for you to understand research, everyone will have varying understanding of this, but it might help if you understand risk a little bit better or your chance of things happening. And don't be afraid if you're having a consultation with a healthcare provider and they're giving you information and they're telling you a certain risk of something and it isn't quite sort of clicking in, you're not digesting it well. Don't be afraid to just ask for it to be presented in a slightly different way, just something that you understand and clicks for you. And it's really important when you're being given this information that you really understand it. So don't be afraid to dig a little more at the research, look at the national guidelines, look at your local guidelines, and just ask for a little bit more information when talking about risk. So my third tip is for you to find what is your instinct telling you in this situation. Now, you're pregnant, you've got roaring hormones, you're creating a person. So for some, instinct is really strong and it's really easy to tap into. And some people find actually their instinct can be quite overwhelming in pregnancy. But for others, they're not quite sure. You are bombarded left, right and centre with information, opinions, what your next door neighbour thinks might be a good idea, what you're reading on forums. And sometimes within that, your instinct can get a little bit muddled. So one of the tips that I can give you is to just spend some time when you're feeling calm and relaxed. Maybe if you've had a nice bath or you've been doing something to kind of bring your stress levels down, just to tune in to what your instinct's telling you. So if you're faced with, for example, two very different decisions, spend some time sort of visualizing and thinking about one option and noticing what you feel in your body. And then spend some time thinking about the alternative option and just notice. And even if you write down a few words of what you're feeling in your body. So many people say when something feels right, they have that warm, fuzzy feeling. Their instinct is telling them that this feels right at the time. You don't feel particularly uncomfortable. But if your instinct is sort of a niggle about something, then you might notice you feel a sort of tight stomach or a tight chest. Some people feel a little bit heavier. So it's important just to tune into that and then maybe lean into that a little bit and wonder, why is your instinct telling you that? What else do you need to find out? So it's really important. And when we are making decisions, you can line up all the facts and figures, but if your instinct isn't in alignment with it, usually it means you need more information or you need more time. But just spend some time just tuning into that, letting it guide you, and then it might open up some other avenues for you. So don't be afraid to just spend time focusing on that. So tip number 4 is to know, what are your time limits? When does this decision really need to be made by? Let's face it, if you're sat in a really busy clinic, do you need to have a decision, a final answer within the few minutes that you've got left in that room? These are really important life-changing decisions. So you're perfectly within your rights to just say that you're going to go away and sleep on it and bring your decision later. Now, there are times where we have to make these really important decisions at very short notice. And normally that's when we're faced with a short timeline, for example, in an emergency situation. Now, I will make another video on that because I think it's really important to be able to hone in those skills in those situations. But right now, if you're trying to make a decision that affects you later on down the line, then you're perfectly within your rights to go and sleep on it. And sometimes how you feel about something initially, it might change over time. So absolutely do make it clear that you may need some more time to go and think about what your decision's going to be. So you can bring that back at any time. Just remember that you are in the driving seat. This is your pregnancy. This is your decision. This is your body. This may affect you for the rest of your life. So take that time to sink in, think about what's important to you, go away and do more research, and then you can politely just state that you're going to give that information or your decision later.